It is overtime here again at Old Favorite Friday, and we are at Barrel of Monks as always. And I'm with Ralph Renault, our head brewer, and we are talking about Sixpoint Resin Double IPA. You know, it's funny because Sixpoint came down to Florida, and I was already well into the craft beer scene by that time, and kind of a late arrival. You know, places like Stone and Dogfish and a lot of other breweries had kind of beaten it down here. I always look at Sixpoint as like a new brewery because of that, which is really odd because it's not a new brewery at all. It's been around for a long time. And I didn't realize that this beer has actually been in production for over 10 years. But, you know, how time flies, right?
For sure.
So I was looking at this, I was like, well, this is going to qualify as an old favorite beer. Well, 10 years of making great beer, I think qualifies for an old favorite. I was talking to you a little bit about resin, and you said you really love this beer. What do you love about it, Ralph?
So what I love about it, and especially now going back to it, is I know Sixpoint will tweak their recipes over time a bit, but this to me was such a classic example of an East Coast brewery doing the West Coast thing. We're even having it now, it's like you can still see if it shows on camera, it's got that like slight orange, almost not, I wouldn't call it amber, but darker orange kind of look, and it's got that
that little orange hue, yeah.
And it's got a sweet body, but nothing's like cloying or anything. And then immediately the first thing I noticed, like when I was smelling on the nose, is like a pineapple citrus, but very specific pineapple. And then the thing that I've always remembered, and I'm glad it's still there, is that bitterness. When you take a sip, that biting bitterness. So to me, this was kind of like you said, it was definitely a little bit after the other stuff, but it was a good example of, you know, them doing the style that at the time was like king of IPAs.
I want to make sure I'm not misrepresenting when this beer came out as opposed to other ones or the age of the brewery. I'm talking about my experience with the beer coming down to Florida, and we get stuff at different times, right? So,
exactly.
So you might have been having this beer a lot earlier than I did, but I love the name of the beer, resin, and it brings up that resinous, piney, dank is a word that's used very often. Those are words that we don't hear a lot in IPAs anymore in the world of haze and tropical fruit. So it's refreshing to have this beer that kind of retains those roots of those classic. I mean, these are sea hops. I believe it was Cascade and Chinook were two of the hops in this beer, if I read on the website and I'm remembering properly. I mean, this is a classic IPA profile, is it not?
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. They execute it really well because a lot of the classics, although I do love them, some can be just like any beer, even today's. It can be a little too one-sided to one way or the other. They might overcompensate. They're like, oh, this is really bitter, so we have to make it really sweet. But this is really well balanced, but also, like I said, kind of giving you what you want in the way that bitterness to me is such a refresher that it makes me want to go back and take another sip. But I could see it would take, even though this is, I think, if it's still the same, like a 9% beer,
9.1%.
It would take me a while to get a like palate fatigue from this. Like I could drink a few, wind up getting in trouble and be like, oh yeah, maybe I should have slowed down, because there's really not too much that would stop me from, you know, just knocking these back.
I'm glad you mentioned the ABV at 9.1 because this does not drink like 9.1. Yeah. This is dangerous in that way because I'm already halfway through my can. I just poured it a few minutes ago because it's really, really smooth. And I love the fact that this is so complex. And a good IPA and those classic IPAs that we're talking about give you multiple layers of flavor, and you're picking up citrus and you're picking up a little bit of tropical, but you're getting grassy, resiny, piney, dank, as we said earlier. So it's layered. There's something different every single time you try it, and that's what really, really good IPAs do. And I think today we're really focused on like kind of overabundance of one flavor profile, and I think you lose something in that, and you don't necessarily want to go for another one or keep going back for a sip once you've gotten that one flavor in your mouth. When you're designing an IPA, right, because you're the IPA guru here, we've talked about this before, about adding a little bit of that dank, a little bit of that flavor profile. Is that still kind of your mentality of trying to balance those flavors out with the fruit?
Oh, for sure. I think you can't, I think like with anything, if it's one-sided, it's how it sounds. You're going to notice it. And like you said, there's only so much one flavor you can have. And just from even how I do things, so I can kind of only think of in my mindset, but I imagine they're doing the same thing. And a lot of what you'll hear about now is hop timing, when you're putting in the hops, And as silly as that sounds, that's such a big part of getting, you know, tropical versus getting resinous or vice versa. And you need to do those together, like you said, to get that balance. And that's what I try and do. And I feel like they really captured that in this. So, you know, whoever's their head brewer now is doing a good job of like putting things throughout and doing it in such a way where you're not losing either of those.
Yeah, listen, I really love this beer. We haven't featured a lot of double IPAs on Old Favorite Friday. I don't know why that is. It's not any particular reason, but we just kind of go through all these beers, and I'm happy that we've done this. We have done most of the IPAs we have done have been a bit more bitter and more classic in style. I think there's a reason for that because we tend to love that. You're actually brewing a West Coast IPA tomorrow for the first time that we've done a West Coast IPA here. So it's definitely something that we love, and we want people to remember, hey, go back, pick this beer up you haven't had in a while. I will also say this, is that for a beer that's been around for over 10 years, and I think 300,000 check-ins on Untappd, this has an almost 4-star rating. And that is really rare. Especially in the day of haze and tropical fruit, where you can't get a 4 from somebody unless unless it looks like a milkshake. To maintain that perception in the market, forget brewers like us, people that really know the industry, but to maintain that perception for this long is really, really impressive. And I think it speaks volumes to the quality of the beer and speaks volumes to doing something with layers, doing something classic, doing something that's complex.
Yeah, and I was gonna because I haven't looked at the Untappd, but that is great to hear. Because one thing I was even gonna comment is, while I don't talk to a lot of younger drinkers or haven't seen too many recently, or at least the way it was when we were getting into craft beer and all that, but I think if you gave this to someone who is like the just haze and has to be tropical and like you said, milkshake, I would be very surprised if they didn't at least like take another sip or go back to this, because even in today's world of overly sweet, I feel like this really does stand out. So the fact that they've actually managed to keep that at least presence in the rating communities or where it matters to some beer geeks, that's really cool to see.
Yeah, it's really impressive. Great brewery in Sixpoint. You mentioned a bunch of other beers that you really love by them. Do you want to mention them here?
Oh yeah, like they're 4 beans, 5 beans, the crisp, Bengali Tiger. I mean, even they do this was before the haze, but they would do the unfiltered version of resin, which was a puff. All those, and was a high res, and later on they came up with anti-resin. So yeah,
So you're a fan?
Yeah.
Okay. So
fan of all they do.
Ralph's a big fan of Sixpoint. I absolutely love this beer, and I've had many of the ones you're talking about, but not every one of them, I'll be honest with you. So maybe we'll see something else come up from Sixpoint on Old Favorite Friday in the future. Please go pick up a 6-pack of resin if you can find it this weekend. Please tell us what beers we should be drinking next week for Old Favorite Friday. We love taking suggestions. Please like, subscribe so you can see more of these videos. Follow us on social media accounts and you'll see the videos as well. But next time we'll see you next week on Old Favorite Friday. Cheers.